Okay, we'll wait 1 more minute and then we'll get going. My name's Steve. I run marketing at Harness. I'll be your MC for the next 30 minutes. Okay, I think we're good. Let's get started. All right, let's kick it off.
Over the past decade, migrating to the public cloud and adopting continuous delivery has enabled developers to move faster than ever before, accelerating their time to market from weeks to on-demand using self-service capabilities. Today, developers consume the cloud like they consume coffee, but they never get to see the real cost, resulting in CFOs and finance teams receiving a bill every 30 days with little to no context. See, the problem today is that developers lack basic visibility into which apps or microservices are consuming cloud resources and cost. Over-provisioned infrastructure, deserted environments, zombie nodes, or even underutilized clusters can all be cost wildfires, but they go unnoticed until someone finally picks up the bill. In a world where developers are scrambling to determine the root cause of cloud costs, tagging has become the new scripting. However, tagging cloud infrastructure with labels is a time-consuming, mind-numbing, and never-ending exercise that at best is only 75% accurate in an ever-changing world. Imagine if your developers didn't need to tag to get visibility. With Harness's continuous efficiency, they now can. With complete context and cost visibility, by app, microservice, environment, cluster, and more. Think of it as root cost analysis for developers. Harness Continuous Efficiency provides fast time to value and instant savings, seamless integration with CD, developer cost context and visibility, root cost analysis for Kubernetes and Amazon ECS clusters, cloud event correlation, so developers can correlate cost with events like deployments and auto-scaling. Multi-cloud support for AWS, Azure, and GCP. And all this with zero tagging. At AWS reInvent last year, it was noted that 35% of cloud spend is waste. Let Harness fix that for you with continuous efficiency, now generally available.
So with that, I'd like to introduce our CEO and founder of Harness, Jyoti Bansal. Jyoti's going to walk us through why he created continuous efficiency.
Hey, thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone. Exciting day for us at Harness to be launching our new product, continuous efficiency. We've all heard this statistic that 35% of cloud spend is waste. And this is a statistic coming from AWS itself. In practice, even more of the cloud spend is waste. As someone very deeply involved in DevOps space for quite some long time now, I see that waste everywhere. So the question is, why is this so bad? Why can't we really reduce this? You know, we have been using cloud for many years now. The cloud is mainstream, and we still have this 35-40% waste, maybe more in many companies that we see. So I'll tell you a personal story or experience when I was running my last company, AppDynamics. At AppDynamics, our cloud bill started to spike heavily to a few $1 million quarter, and we were ready to go public, to go IPO at that time. So the cost was a big issue that for us to get ready for IPO. So we decided to go take a deeper look inside our cloud bill, and like what most people do, we put 2 people on it to really dive deep into the cloud bill. It took them 3 weeks. They look at every, where is the cost going? They try to allocate the cost, trying to figure it out. It turned out that we had one application with 2 microservices that was costing us a lot. So what I did, I went to the lead engineer for that, and I asked the lead engineer, hey, do you know this particular service is costing us millions of dollars, and why is that? Um, his answer was, I have no idea. I had no idea that this application is costing us this much. And that to me was like, hey, how can you not know that this is costing us $3 million a year? And I said, no one tells me about the bill. We don't know about the bill. The bill is still, even if we look at the AWS bill, it's really sort of a mumbo jumbo for us when it comes to, for speaking the language of that, what we would need to know as engineers, as developers, right? And that's, so once he knew that there was this problem, that this was costing us this much, it really took 1 week for that team to bring the cost down by 60%. They tweaked the code, they tuned the code, they made changes. The cost was down by 60% in 1 week. And I was shocked at that, when I saw that. And I've been wanting to solve this challenge around cloud cost quite personally since then. And to me, that's really what is fundamentally broken about cloud costs, that the developers are not empowered. They don't have the right visibility. They don't have the right tools. They don't have the right ownership around cloud costs. So that's really the new approach that we are bringing it. We call it shift down. The idea behind the shift down approach is that you bring the ownership and visibility and around cloud costs to the developers and to the DevOps teams themselves. You make it very deep part of the developer and DevOps lifecycle. So we call it democratizing the cloud cost visibility, for developers to understand the cost of software delivery, for them to proactively manage and optimize their cloud cost, right? So if you look at the history of the DevOps movement, the DevOps movement started because it wasn't working when Dev and Ops were two different silos. The developers were not involved in the operational aspects of things, and it really wasn't working. And that's why DevOps movement was started. If you look at on the security side, the movement of shift left started many years ago because the application security wasn't working when developers were not involved in application security and the security teams were completely different. We really believe that the way to manage the cost and bring down that 35-40% of the waste that's been there for so long now is to create a similar kind of movement, that what we could calling shift down, that you bring the cost visibility and governance and empower the developers to do that. So let me tell you about how Harness works to solve this. First of all, we give developers full context and visibility in real time for their applications. We give them full, and this is all happening in real time, not that a week later, a month later, you're getting the visibility. Then we'll give the similar visibility about each of their microservices. That's the language that the developers speak. That's how they operate, like what applications, what microservices, what is the cost of those, right? And then we give them full visibility around their, Kubernetes clusters, ECS clusters, the namespaces, pods, workloads, the details that that's what that allows them to know what's really happening, right? And then comes the most exciting part, that we will automatically correlate any change that is happening in the system, and the impact on the cost, on the cost that change is going to have. So, the cost could be, your cost of an application could increase, the cost of a microservice could increase, the cost of of an entire cluster, or, by namespace. Any change could be a deployment, change could be a config change, anything that is happening. It's completely correlated to what is the impact of the cost, and developers will know it almost in real time when things are when things happen. So you don't really have to go and react to it a week later or 2 weeks later or a month later. You don't really, so no more guesswork on where the cost is. No more guesswork on why the cost started to suddenly started to go up. No more waiting for a month or so to get the bill, and finally, no more someone in the finance team yelling at you about the cost. And we call this root cost analysis, that this is root cost analysis, the way we had root cause analysis on for developers to figure out, performance bottlenecks, etc. This is really the cost bottlenecks and the cost changes that we bring in. And even better, once you have all of this, you now can empower, once the developers are empowered with all of this, you can give developers budgets and accountability to manage the cost of their applications. I'll tell you, like, developers are smart. Once they know what's wrong, it's pretty easy for them to fix. The story I told from my experience at AppDynamics, like how easy was it to fix the cost once they knew. And the earlier they know, the sooner they know in their developer lifecycle, the better they will manage the cost. You have to give them tools so that the tools will allow them. Then you can allow them to have accountability around that and budgets around it. And that's the core of our new product, Harness Continuous Efficiency, which will show you a full demo, right after this. I'll tell you a few stories of just the results of this already, right? It sounds too good to be true. So it all comes down to, okay, what we were able to achieve. So this is an example from Harness itself. Harness itself is operates in the cloud. We are a SaaS product. Using our continuous efficiency, we were able to reduce our cloud bill 40%. You see, these are real numbers. These are real numbers that you see there. And this, we are spending about $1.2 million a year in the cloud, and we're down, 40%. It's almost $500,000 of saving for us, with this visibility, where now developers have control, they have visibility, they have the tools, they have the budgets to manage the cloud costs themselves. I'll give a few examples of some of our beta customers. Our beta customer number one, just in a day of putting Harness Continuous Efficiency in, they could see that how much of their the cost was idle or unallocated for just one namespace. So small tweak there, $300 a day of saving. Once the developers knew that this cost is sitting idle for that namespace, the savings started to happen right away. Similar story. Our beta customer number two, when we installed it, what they realized is for one of their ECS clusters, it was just the cluster size was wrong, and they really just could resize it from 5 nodes down to 3 nodes, and that was $300 of saving, right there for them. I'll give one more example here. This is what we call the $1.6 million Kubernetes cluster. This is a beta customer for Harness Continuous Efficiency. They had one Kubernetes cluster out of the hundreds of Kubernetes clusters they had, just costing them $1.6 million a year. We turned on Harness Continuous Efficiency, and we were able to calculate that 85% of the cost is really idle or unallocated, where it's not allocated to to any workloads. Imagine the saving. This is just in a few days. Once you have the visibility in the terms and in the language that the developers and engineers can understand. So that's what the promise of Harness Continuous Efficiency is bringing visibility and control and governance of cost to the hand of the developers and the DevOps teams who really understand the applications the best. These are the people who are doing the deployments. These are the people who are who know the full context. So we just go and empower them. If we empower them, we're gonna get the cost down to where it should be. So with this, I'm going to have Nick Durkin, our field CTO, show a full demo of how this product works.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the introduction, Jyoti. And I think everybody's seen Harness Continuous Delivery, but today we're going to talk about Harness's continuous efficiency. So let's head there. So brand new, what you'll find is Harness has added one more addition, which is Harness Continuous Efficiency. And we'll start looking at what that offers. Today, you'll notice the cloud costs. Quickly, you can see what your different aggregated cloud costs between any and all of your cloud providers. You can also look at your cluster costs specifically. And just as Jyoti mentioned, we can look at our utilized cost, our idle cost. So when we think about idle cost, this is how we've over-provisioned our ECS tasks or Kubernetes pods. And then we can look at our unallocated cost. How many available resources do we have for all of our clusters? And again, we can very quickly see an efficiency score. And currently, we're not actually doing quite that great. So what we can do is we'll go ahead and we'll actually look at why we have some efficiency issues, even inside of Harness's production. Today, we can look at this in the way that Harness gives you context. So we can look at it in the application by Harness. We can also look at the cluster spends and even the aggregate between all of your cloud providers, whether it be Amazon, Google, or Azure. The idea here, very quickly, we'll go ahead and look at the cluster-specific information, and we'll get down to that root cost analysis that Jyoti was talking about. Today, we'll notice the costs broken down by, again, what we're utilizing, how much we have currently idle, and then what we've over-provisioned with unallocated cost. You can look at any given cluster, right? We can pick a cluster. In fact, let's take one that's actually trending up. We're starting to spend more on this cluster, and we have that cost trend. So we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at that very specific cluster. Right now, I'm looking at it as a daily function, but let's look at this in an hourly capacity as well. Understanding, right, exactly where those costs are coming from at any given hour of the day to make sure we have a very clear understanding of where all of those costs are from. Again, this can be sorted daily, hourly, monthly, and so forth to give you that view that you're actually looking for. We can dive into workloads that are specifically being operated on by that cluster. We can also look at namespaces and pieces. Let's go look at one of the workloads that we know is actually causing us some problems. Let's go look at our batch processing workloads. What we'll notice is we see a huge cost trend, right? We see a 40% increase in those costs, and let's figure out why that is. Let's get you down to that root cost analysis. Let's give you that event correlation that gives it to you automatically, right? Automatically, what we're starting to see is the maximum and average CPU and memory utilization. So we can have an understanding of what we're using at any given point and have an understanding of what those costs are. We can also look at the events that are correlating this. And today, right, I'm looking at it for the last 7 days, we can look at this, say, over, I don't know, the last month or any given time frame that matters. What we'll see is an interesting increase here, and we can actually see the events that correlated to it. Very quickly, we can understand not only were modifications made to the Kubernetes cluster, but we can see the exact modifications that were made and potentially why those costs went up. In fact, what we'll see is both the limits and the requests have increased dramatically, causing that cost to go up accordingly. Again, giving you that instantaneous view of exactly why your costs are going up. Now, this can be looked at in the workloads that are important to us, right? This can also be aggregated by the namespaces that we care about. So we can dive into the namespaces specifically and see all of the different namespaces and where those costs are coming from. Or more importantly, if you decide to continue to do labeling and manually tag, by all means, continue to use all of those labels that you have, right? And know that those are here and available to be viewed and have that same cost analysis. What you'll notice, just like everybody else, we've got a ton of it that isn't labeled appropriately. Right? In fact, some of our cost trend is associated with that. One of the benefits of Harness is that you don't have to have that. You don't have to start labeling. You don't have to add that because Harness will automatically add that context for you, right? Whether it be in the cluster sense or in the application itself. We can dive into any application, deploy it into Harness, and automatically gain that context for you. The idea here, very simply, is we know what services are being deployed, right? We know what environments that they're actually being deployed to. And automatically, we can give you this without having you tag or label any of this information because Harness automatically has that context. It gives you the ability to dive into any given application at any given environment to understand exactly where those costs lie and where those increases or decreases are coming from, allowing you to then get to that cost analysis by diving deep into it and understanding any changes that have been made. This also stands true for your cloud providers. If you want to see the information that you traditionally get from your bill and cut it up in the exact same way, it's available for you for your cloud providers as well. Whether it be Amazon, GCP, or Azure, you can now sort and group by all the different parts and pieces that you'd like to. Whether it be regions or services or accounts or instance types, we can dive into any given configuration and look at exactly where our costs are, in which regions, by which services. Right, and cut it up to the exact piece. This information comes from your billing, so it will mirror your exact billing. If you have custom pricing, this will be displayed exactly as is, and they'll be imported from Harness. The benefit here, right, not only can you actually start showing this, you can actually start taking action, but you can also start giving people budgets. And the budgets can use that same analytics to understand the cost trends. Right, let's go ahead and look at some of the budgets that we have in our production environments. Right now, we have an actual and a forecasted budget that you can see. The forecasted budget will take into that information if we increase those spends, and if we see those cost trends, it'll apply that out for you so that you have an understanding of where those costs will end up. And the benefit here is that you can decide to alert and take action based on either the current cost or that future cost. We can look at the budgets based on specified amount, or you can even just go against the previous month. Let's get better than we were last month. More importantly, we can start looking at how we want to alert and take action. Do we want it based on actual cost, or do we want it based on that forecasted cost? As we see that increase in spending, we want to be able to let people know, hey, you know what? Even though it's 2 or 3 days into the month, we've now seen an increase in cost, which is going to put you over your forecasted budget. So you should probably go ahead and look at it now. And that's where the hourly or even daily view can start giving you that visibility. The best part of Harness and setting up continuous efficiency is how easy it is to set up. Traditionally with these, they're long and cumbersome to set up. But with Harness, you can take all of the cloud providers that you already have configured, and with a single click of a button, you can enable continuous efficiency, which allows us to aggregate that data for you and to be able to make it visible. 24 hours after you selected this, it's now here and available for you. Steve, I think I'll leave it off to you, and we can send it to the next.
Thank you, Nick. So next, we've got David Cydia. David was our first customer of continuous efficiency. So super excited to have David on board. David's going to walk you through his experiences with continuous efficiency. David, over to you.
Good morning. Yeah, I work for a company called Go Spot Check. We're a mid-sized startup located in Denver, Colorado. We're a field execution app. So data that used to be collected by field teams, maybe on a clipboard and then sent back and collated into spreadsheets over several weeks. We give people, there's a central office can make missions for data collection. Field teams use those missions to collect it, and then it goes back for real-time analytics or close to real-time analytics back to people at the central office. And we've been on a migration from Heroku, platform as a service, over into Kubernetes over the last 2 years. And we partnered with Harness very early on to provide continuous delivery. And as soon as they came up with the continuous efficiency tool, we got really excited about that and wanted to get involved. Previous to this, we did have a separate tool that we used for analyzing our cloud costs and budgeting. And one of the limitations of that is my team, you know, I'm a DevOps engineer, but really I'm more on the operations side of things, right, to the developers and trying to facilitate things for them. And early on, that tool was very useful for figuring out, you know, what buckets should have different retention policies set on them and sort of deeper level infrastructure stuff. And it was useful. We saved a lot of money, but as we started to realize those sort of low-hanging fruit savings, we got into the place of, well, we could have much smaller clusters, except that apps are requesting, you know, much larger have much larger requests and limits than they really need. Sort of, you know, as Nick was showing a moment ago, having that correlation of events is really useful. So you know, we need to, as Jody said, push down the information. I think we have a lot of buy-in already, as I'll talk about in a second, but the most difficult part is getting people accurate data, getting them that context, and people can't own their costs unless they know what they are. The biggest, you know, difficulty we've run into with cloud spend is just simply that people don't know what the effects of their actions are. And to get them to own those effects, they have to know about them. So we went right in. It was, you know, we've been looking at the continuous efficiency data, you know, like Steve mentioned, we were the first people into the beta, and there was an immediate reaction to it of people being able to see what their application costs and where, you know, we have development environments, we have integration environments, we have lots of different places. We have like namespace environments where people can own kind of everything and deploy as much as they want. And there were some surprises there for people of, really, just by running that development environment, this is how much I'm costing us. And this is already a really kind of sensitive thing, because this year is this year and there's a lot of economic pressure. And for people to immediately be able to see that and have that information, people were excited about just having that in front of them to take action on. One of the early things we affected was we have a search microservice, and in production, it was costing far more money than we thought it was. It, in fact, And one of the reasons we moved from Heroku was over into Kubernetes was to save money, and we were not on this particular service. And as you can see, the vast majority of what we were spending on it was completely idle. So we were able to just simply adjust the requests and limits and bring down the cost by over 80%, just purely knowing what we could bring it down to safely. Because that's one of the difficulties for developers, is that you deploy a service, and especially when you deploy it into production, you don't want it to go down immediately. So I think that's what leads to a lot of over provisioning, is people are afraid of their service being affected by a lack of resources. So they provide way too much. But then there's never a prompt to come back. We set a lot of alerts around, this is using too much of its resources. I think less people set alerts around, this is not using enough of the resources you've given. And putting it in a budget perspective really helps people see, like, oh, yeah, I'm way underutilizing what I've asked for. That drop in terms of daily cost, you can correlate it with that event of the requests and limits being changed, and that's super helpful. I'm actually expecting to see another one of these today, because we had a developer who we're now starting to run stateful apps and databases in our clusters, and we have these very large database-oriented Couchbase node pools now. And in our staging environment, they were way over provisioned because we thought we would have stronger perf testing than we would at this time. And the developer actually this morning went in and looked at the continuous efficiency, saw he was underutilized, and dropped the node pool size by 24%. And we're now saving over $1,000 a month just because he was able to go in and look at this and have it directly available. And that was without any prodding from us. No, like, hey, your cluster node pools are way too big, can you drop those? He just saw it and took action. So as Nick was saying, you click that button, 24 hours later you have it. So maybe up and running in 24 hours, but it's not difficult to get this going. And that was a huge thing for us, was with our previous vendor, you had to add specific labels to the cluster, you had to install something extra, and then you had to get kind of everything lined up. And then that would break every time there was a version change in the cluster, which we try to keep up to date. So that happened pretty regularly. And it was difficult. This was very easy. Harness is already out there. It was very seamless to get going. We've already seen 40% of our teams take full ownership, and the ones who haven't are either still in the process of transitioning over, so they're not living in the cluster day to day, or they're just kind of swamped with stuff, or they're not in prod yet. So yeah, it's been really heartening to see how excited people are. The question is, how do you get teams to take ownership? And I think people want to take ownership. You just have to empower them to do so. And that's true of all DevOps work. If you don't give people the tools to do their jobs effectively and to do these things effectively, if they're cordoned off, people can't reach them. And so we've seen a lot of self-service, like that example I just gave, of people hopping right in and using the data and taking action and making things more efficient.
Great. Thank you, David. That was fantastic to hear that story, and thanks for being customer number one. I know the feedback you gave our teams, and that the progress we've made has been phenomenal. So thank you on behalf of the company.
Thank you, David. And it was great to hear you tell the story in how empowering developers work. If you give them the right tools and you give them and once you empower them, and they start taking ownership, things start to happen. So it's that's exactly what you want to bring with this product to the world of developers and DevOps.
It's working.
Yeah. And so if you're interested in seeing a demo of continuous efficiency, like one Nick gave you, but kind of more specific to your environment, you can request a demo on our website, and we'll send you a t-shirt like me and Nick are modeling right now. So that's available as well. And I believe we've got lots of questions. So thank you for your questions that you've been submitting during the talk. First question, can you go into more detail around why tagging isn't required?
Jyoti, do you want to cover that, or do you want me to?
Sure, let me cover that. So tagging is not required with Harness, because Harness, if you're using Harness for continuous delivery, the Harness completely understands what's being deployed to what infrastructure. to what namespaces, to what clusters, to what part of infrastructure. So we can already map it back of the what's happening in terms of what's there in your infrastructure and what applications and microservices and teams what they are doing. The second part is Harness, which is a key part of our innovation here. Is Harness is automatically listening to events inside your Kubernetes clusters and your ECS clusters, and it's looking at when there are increase in resource consumption or inside your clusters, and it's correlating it back to any kind of events from any deployment that's happening. So all of that is happening under the hood automatically, without you requiring any tags to put things back to what resources map to what. And that's why you don't need any tagging with Harness to get all this visibility.
If I could just add something really quick there too, I'll say that for the last year, my team has had a story in our backlog. Go through all the Harness configs and add billing labels so that in our old vendor system, we could break down our cluster spend by deployment. And in any given week, if it was the thing was harden the database infrastructure or go add billing labels, we didn't add billing labels. And like 2 months ago, we got to just delete that story from our backlog.
Thanks for sharing that, David.
Yeah.
And question for David, you mentioned getting developer buy-in and you mentioned empowerment. Did you get any pushback?
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, I think the most we have is just people who haven't dived into it yet, or, and again, I think that's mostly just because they're not fully in this world yet. They might still have a bunch of stuff in Heroku that we are migrating over or whatever. The feedback I've gotten was, wow, this is great and really easy. Thanks.
Okay. Question on pricing. How is C priced?
C is priced based on a percentage calculation of your cluster spend or a percentage based on your cloud spend. It's kind of standard with industry practices.
Okay. Question just come in. Does the cost calculation only work for deployed services, or will it pick up everything in the cluster?
Perfect. I tried to show it, and I apologize if I didn't accordingly. It will show all of your cost expenses, regardless of whether it's deployed with or without Harness. It'll show all of your cluster expenses if you have it attached to clusters, and then it'll give you extra context if you're deploying it with Harness. So the answer is all of it, but you can get even more context if you deploy it with Harness.
Got it. And if you have discounted rates with your cloud provider, is that reflected in the product?
Yes. So if you're looking at your cloud spend, say your Amazon, your GCP, or your Azure spend, the billing that comes specifically from and that has been negotiated with your business will be shown there in accordance. So you will see the exact pricing that you're getting, not standard pricing.
Great. And I think we're past the bottom of the hour, so no more time for questions, but this session will be recorded and available for replay. Thank you all for joining us for the live reveal, especially David. Thank you for taking time out to walk us through your experiences through the beta, and look forward to hearing from you all soon. Thank you. For more information, you can check out Continuous Delivery on Harness.io.